Muy buenos días a todos y todas.
Good
Vamos a
morning,
empezar el
everyone. We are
webinario
going
en
to
unos
begin with the webinar
minutos.
in a few minutes.
Solamente quiero
I would
decirles
just like
que
to
tenemos
let
la
you know that there is
interpretación en
interpretation
inglés y
available
español hoy.
in English
Entonces,
and
para
Spanish
elegir
today. So in order
el
to
idioma de
choose the
interpretación,
language
pueden dar
that you want to listen in, you
abajo de su
can
pantalla
select at the bottom
un
of your screen,
pequeño
there's a
globo
globe.
y se puede elegir
And when you click
español
on it,
o
you can
inglés.
select either English or
Entonces
Spanish.
pueden elegir
That way you'll
el
be able to
idioma de
listen in the language you prefer.
su selección. Entonces, de nuevo,
And so
buenos
once
días
again, good
a
morning.
todos y todas
Good
y
morning to
bienvenidos al
everyone.
taller de la
Welcome to
Agencia
the
Financiera de
workshop
Inspección de los
from the
Alimentos,
Canadian
CFIA,
Agency
sobre el
on
reglamento
Food
para la
Inspection
identidad de los
Agency,
alimentos en Canadá
CFIA,
y el
for the
proceso de
inspection
importación
of
de alimentos.
safe food
Mi
in
nombre es
Canada.
Marie-Pierre
My
Mignon,
name is
soy gerente
Marie-Pierre
nacional
Mignon. I'm
del
the
Grupo
National
de
Manager
Cooperación
for the
Técnica
Group
de la
of Technical
CFIA.
Cooperation of
Mi
the
grupo se
CFIA.
encarga de
My group
coordinar
is
las
responsible
actividades
for
de
coordinating the
cooperación
activities
técnica
for
en
technical
las
cooperation
secretarías de
in
trabajo
one
de
of
la
the
CFIA, es
secretariats, labor
decir, la
secretariats of
salud
CFI,
animal, la
meaning
salud vegetal
health
y la
animal,
buen cuidado de los
health,
alimentos.
and food safety.
Como le dije,
As I
para
was
los
saying,
que solo acaban
as
de
I was telling those
unirse,
who
tenemos la
have joined,
interpretación
we
en
have
español y en
interpretation
inglés.
available
Pueden
in
seleccionar el
English and
idioma dando
Spanish. You
clic
can
en el
select the
pequeño
language by
globo
clicking
debajo de
on
la
the globe
pantalla.
at the bottom of the screen.
Tenemos tiempo también para
We have some
preguntas
time
al final
at
del
the end
webinario
for a
y pueden usar
Q&A,
la
and
función
you can
Q&A
use the
abajo de
option
la
for
pantalla
Q&A, the
o
box for
pueden usar
Q&A
el chat
at the bottom
también.
part of the screen, or
Y
you can
para
type your
concluir,
questions in
vamos
the
a
chat.
distribuir una
And at
pequeña
the end, we are going to
encuesta, un formulario de
send out
respuesta al
a
final.
survey
Por
for
favor,
feedback at the
unos
end. So
minutos para
please take
darnos
a
sus
few minutes at
comentarios
the
y
end to
siempre
type in
nos
your
gustaría, como
feedback,
podemos,
because we
mejorar
always like to
nuestras
learn how we
actividades.
can improve our
Entonces,
activities.
ahora podemos
So
seguir con el programa. Me
we
gustaría
can continue
comenzar
with the agenda.
para
And to start,
agradecer la
I would like to
colaboración con la
start by
Embajada de
thanking
México
the
en Canadá,
collaboration with
que
the Mexico
resultó en el
Embassy in
webinario de
Canada,
hoy.
who
Magnifique, mil
sponsor
gracias
the
por
meeting
todos los
today. Thank you
intercambios que
very
hemos
much for all
tenido
the
hasta el
exchange
día
and
de
the
hoy.
communications we've
Siempre
had
es un
until
gran
this day.
gusto trabajar
It's always a
con la
great
Embajada
privilege
en
for
nuestros
us in the
países.
embassy to have
Hoy
the
nuestro
participation of
experto
you in
Matt
these
Bell del
workshops.
Grupo de Importación de
Our expert
Alimentos
Matt
nos
Bell
hablará
from the
del
food
reglamento para
safety
la inocuidad de
will
los
speak to us
alimentos en
about
Canadá
food
y el proceso
safety for
canadiense
food
de
for
importación para
Canada
este
and the
alimento.
process for food
Espero que
import
esta presentación les dará
into
toda la
Canada. So I
información
hope
que
this
necesiten
presentation
para
will give
poder
you all the
exportar
information needed so
sus
that you can
productos
export
hasta
your
Canadá.
products into Canada.
Entonces, sin
So
esperar más, me
without
gustaría
further
checar con
ado,
la
I would
embajada
like
si
to
quieren
check with the embassy
decir
if
unas
there's anything
palabras
you'd like to
o
say
podemos seguir
or
con el
if we can
webinario.
proceed with the webinar.
Buenos días, gracias
Good
Marie-Pierre y a todo
morning.
el
Thank
equipo
you,
de
Marie-Pierre,
CFIA
and
por
thank
esta
you to the team
oportunidad
at
y
CFIA for this
muchísimas gracias a todas las empresas
opportunity.
mexicanas que
It's
se
a
conectan y
pleasure to have all
productores
the Mexican
tan
companies and the
interesados en
producers
poder tener la
connected
oportunidad de exportar
because they are
alimentos. Muchas
interested
gracias
in
por esta
exporting to Canada. Thank you for
cooperación.
this
Gracias.
opportunity.
Mil gracias.
Thank you.
Entonces, sin
And so,
esperar más,
without
damos la palabra
further
al
ado,
estudio.
Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. I'm just going to attempt to share my screen now. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my presentation.
Sorry, Matt. Different screen.
Yeah. You're not seeing the presentation?
No.
Okay.
Seeing a
nice background.
Okay. Okay. And how about now?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. So thanks, everyone, for the invitation to come and speak today. My name is Matthew Bell. I work in food imports in the International Affairs branch at CFIA. I've been working in food imports at CFIA for almost 15 years now. Most of that time spent working on our Safe Food for Canadians regulations and some of the guidance and policies to support that work. And always welcome the opportunity to speak with our trading partners about Canada's food import process and food import requirements. So thank you for the invitation today. So for today's presentation,
Para la presentación de hoy voy a partirla en dos partes generales.
Talking about the overall commercial food import process in Canada. And then once we have that background and framework, we'll dig in a little bit more to some of the details of the food import requirements in Canada. So just some general context to begin with. Canada is one of the largest food importers in the world. We import from over 190 countries now, and it's valued at more than $44 billion a year. And with growing population and increased efficiency with supply chains, we're seeing that number growing each and every year. Now, Canada is very reliant on food imports for our maintaining access to food for Canadians. Approximately 40% of food products in Canada are imported, and many domestically manufactured foods that contain multiple ingredients, at least one of those ingredients oftentimes is imported as well. And what's driving this volume? I think there's a number of factors at play, not least of which is the limited availability of product in Canada that's available nationally year-round. This is especially the case when we talk about fresh fruits and vegetables. As I'm sure you're aware, Canada is reliant on a fair amount of imports to maintain that availability throughout the year. Canada's cultural diversity plays a factor as well. Canada is a multicultural nation, and Canadians would like access to foods that are culturally significant for them, and that does drive some of our imports as well. And then we have free trade agreements, which, while not driving trade directly, they are facilitating trade by reducing or eliminating barriers to trade, such as reducing things like tariffs, which is something that we've seen a lot in the news lately for sure. So CFIA is involved with implementing requirements for imports and enforcing those requirements, but we do rely on a number of our federal departments and agencies to support us in implementing the import program. I've listed a few on the slide here. Firstly, Health Canada. They establish the health, safety, and nutritional standards for food in Canada. They conduct health risk assessments, and they set the limits for things like pesticide residues on foods as well as other chemicals as well. I'll be talking a little bit more later in the presentation on some of the resources that you can find on Health Canada's website that may be helpful for you. Global Affairs Canada, they are our lead on negotiation of free trade agreements. They also administer the import controls for supply managed goods, so some dairy, poultry, and eggs in Canada. And then we have the Canada Border Services Agency. They are our presence at the border. I'm going to be talking more about their role in the coming slides. But they have a big job. They're responsible for enforcing over 100 acts and regulations at the Canadian border. They review documentation, inspect cargo shipments when they arrive, and they make the final decision about what enters Canada. Okay, on this slide, I just wanted to provide a high-level overview of not just the commercial import process, which you're likely familiar with, but also the interaction of CFIA and CBSA in that process and our roles when it comes to inspection of food entering Canada. So it really starts with, at the bottom of the slide, the foreign vendor, exporter, or foreign supplier who's sending food to Canada. Now, in most cases, they will work with an importer in Canada to send that food shipment to Canada. The importer will oftentimes work with a broker to make an import declaration to the Canada Border Services Agency. And if that import declaration is for food, plants, or animals, CBSA will relay that information and that declaration to us at the CFIA. Now, as I mentioned, CBSA is our primary inspection presence at the border. However, CFIA remains available to them to provide support on the inspection of food, plants, and animals. When it comes to CFIA's role in inspection, the bulk of our activities are done what we call post-border, once the shipments have been released at the border and have entered Canada. And we're focused in two general areas. So we'll be inspecting importers to make sure that they're meeting the regulatory requirements. And we'll also be looking at and verifying the imported food to make sure that it is meeting Canadian requirements as well. Both of these things are being done on a risk basis, so looking to allocate our resources to areas of greatest risk. Okay, when we're talking to importers about our import process, especially those who are new to importing, we tend to describe the process in three key steps. So the first is identifying requirements. And I think the most important resource on CFIA's website when it comes to identifying requirements is our automated import reference system, or the AIRS tool. This tool is basically a lookup tool that uses the harmonized system codes to allow importers and brokers to look up the food import requirements for any food that they want to bring in at a very granular, detailed level. Within AIRS, you will find a list of any licenses, permits, or certificates, what we would call permissions, required to bring the food into Canada. Whether or not a permit or certificate or license is required will really depend on a number of factors, including the type of the food you want to bring in, the country of origin, the destination, the end use, whether it's for further processing, direct to retail, or for laboratory analysis, that type of thing. All of these factors will determine what the permit and certificate requirements are. So once the importer has identified their requirements using AIRS, obtain their permissions, they'll work with the supplier to send a food shipment to Canada. They'll have to declare those goods for clearance at the border. As I mentioned earlier, the declaration will be made to the Canada Border Services Agency, and that will be relayed to CFIA for review. CFIA will review that declaration, and if all the documentation, permits, and certificates have been provided, we'll provide a release recommendation back to CBSA. One of the things we emphasize when we're speaking with importers is the importance of making that declaration as far in advance of the shipment arriving at the border as possible. This way we have time, if there are issues with the declaration, to correct those issues before the shipment arrives at the border, and avoiding delays at the border. So this is going to be more efficient for CFIA, for CBSA, and for industry if we can get those issues resolved before the shipment arrives. Okay, so as I mentioned, once the shipment arrives at the Canadian border, CBSA will be following a standard operating procedure for reviewing that shipment. They'll look for any necessary documentation. They'll make a decision about whether to do an inspection of the shipment, and they will decide to release that shipment into Canada or not. So that's kind of wraps up what I wanted to say about the commercial food import process. I'll shift now to talking about the import requirements themselves. The focus of this discussion will be on the Safe Food for Canadians regulations, where we'll find the majority of these requirements. So in the regulations, we have three key pillars of requirements. The first is licensing. The second is preventive controls and preventive control plans. This is essentially equivalent to a HACCP type of requirement. And then we have the third pillar, which is traceability. I'll go through each of these in a bit more detail in the coming slides. Okay, on importer licensing, most commercial food shipments sent to Canada must be imported by an importer who holds a Safe Food for Canadians license. Licensing assigns responsibility to a person or business to ensure that all the applicable requirements of the regulations are being met. It's important to note that if you're an exporter sending food to Canada, you do not need to be licensed. However, for most foods, you'll need to be working with a licensed importer in Canada. Now, I think prior to this session, there were some questions brought forward regarding what we call non-resident importers, that is, businesses holding a license while not being located in Canada or being located outside of Canada. So I just wanted to mention that for foods coming from Mexico, there are two categories of foods which are permitted, where you're permitted to have a non-resident importer. That is meat and live or raw shellfish. The reason for that is that we have systems recognition arrangements in place for those products, and that's providing the food assurance that we need, food safety assurance that we need to allow for the non-resident importer to hold the license outside of Canada. For all other foods, exporters of those foods will need to work with an importer in Canada, physically located in Canada, to hold the license for those foods. The SFCR, the regulations, do not place any specificity or requirements on who that person can be or who that business can be. However, please keep in mind that the license holder is the party responsible for meeting all of the Safe Food for Canadians regulations requirements, and they are the ones who may be inspected by the CFIA and will have to demonstrate compliance. I'm happy to come back to the topic of non-resident importers after the presentation if you have additional questions. Okay, shifting now to our second pillar, the Importer Preventive Control Plan. This is a written plan that the importer needs to maintain, which sets out the food safety measures and food safety controls that are in place for the imported food. Now, there are a number of things that need to be included in this plan, and they're listed in, set out in the regulations, and I've also listed them here on the slide. For example, the importer will need to document the hazards associated with the food they're importing and how those hazards are being mitigated. They'll also need to work with their foreign supplier, because the focus of an importer preventive control plan is really on the conditions under which the food is being manufactured or grown in the foreign country before it comes to Canada. So there are a number of controls that they'll need to document that are being put in place by their supplier. And I've listed some of those here, things like establishment conditions, which includes the conditions in the growing fields, sanitation, pest control, loading, unloading, and storage of the food before it comes to Canada, and employee hygiene. These are examples of things that will need to be documented and accounted for in the importer's preventive control plan. So it really emphasizes the importance of a strong working relationship between the importer and the supplier, strong communication between the importer and the supplier, so the importer is aware of the conditions that the food is being prepared under and the controls that are in place so that they can meet Canadian requirements. Okay, within Part 4 of the regulations, we also have requirements related to investigation, complaints, and recalls. Importers will need to maintain a recall plan, have a plan in place to document and investigate complaints as well. Those are all set out again in Part 4 of the regulations. So what information does the importer need? Again, based on the information on the previous slide, if you're a supplier of food to Canada, you can expect that the importer will be looking to make sure that the suppliers understand the risks associated with the food that's being exported to Canada and are taking steps to mitigate those risks. They'll also be looking for information around some of those controls I mentioned that are being implemented before the food is sent to Canada. Importers may ask of their foreign supplier evidence of a food safety certification program that's been put in place. This is not a requirement under the regulations, but it is something that many importers ask of their suppliers as a way of meeting the regulatory requirements. So this is something that suppliers may be asked. Okay, and then the third pillar is traceability requirements. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but just to mention that it follows the international best practice of one step backwards and one step forwards. So the importer will be expected to document specific information about the food that they're being provided by their supplier, who's providing the food, the date on which it was provided, etc. And then they'll be keeping similar information regarding where it's been distributed after it's come into Canada, whether it's to a distributor, retailer, etc. Okay, so in addition to those requirements that I just described for importers, there are also specific requirements that will potentially apply to the imported food itself. Now, whether or not these requirements apply to a particular food, it really depends on the type of food that's being sent to Canada. So we have requirements related to grade standards, standard container sizes, labeling and packaging of food, which I'll talk about in the coming slide. And I also wanted to highlight that there may be plant health and animal health requirements for a food. Now, if importers are using the automated import reference system, the AIRS tool that I mentioned earlier, they can find the food, plant, and animal health requirements for admissibility into Canada in the AIRS tool. So that's one reason why we direct importers to go there first. Just something to keep in mind. It's not necessarily the case for all food. The other thing I wanted to mention is regarding organic foods. This is an area of focus for CFIA. It's covered, the organic food requirements are covered under Part 13 of the regulations. And you may have seen recent communication from CFIA regarding imported organic foods. CFIA is looking to enhance some controls in this area. And one of the things we're looking to do is asking importers to upload a copy of their organic certificate when they make a declaration for organic foods in the import declaration to CBSA. And so this is something that CFIA has been working on over the coming months, and you may see additional communication around imported organic foods. Okay, in terms of the labeling requirements, again, it really depends on the type of food that's being sent to Canada. It's worth noting that the labeling requirements in Canada will be different from other trading partners. For example, things like bilingual labeling, the requirement to have English and French labels. The other thing that we like to point out is we do see a fair number of recalls and non-compliance related to undeclared allergens. So it's important that if you're importing a multi-ingredient food with a list of ingredients, to make sure you're aware of the priority allergens in Canada and make sure that the allergens are identified properly on the label. I would direct you to our industry labeling tool for more information on labeling, where you can get more tailored information specific to your scenario to determine what exactly the requirements will be for the type of food you want to send to Canada. Okay, in addition, so pretty much everything I've spoken about so far has been information you can find on the CFIA website, and I'll direct you to some of those resources on the next slide. I wanted to highlight also, though, that Health Canada does have and host a bunch of information that's really valuable, could be really valuable, depending, again, on the type of food that you're sending to Canada. So, for example, the Listeria policy for ready-to-eat foods is found on Health Canada's website, as well as the lists of permitted food additives, maximum residue limits for vet drugs, and then particularly important for fresh fruits and vegetables, the last link here on the slide related to residue limits for pesticides. All this information can be found on Health Canada's website. Okay, I've included here just a screenshot of our food landing page to highlight a few of the key resources that I've been speaking about today. The errors tool that I've mentioned a couple of times is linked in the top right corner here. And this again is the guidance tool where you can find the food, plant, and animal requirements for importing into Canada. If you're looking for further information around the importer requirements or the expectations of foreign suppliers, you can find that under the Food Safety for Industry tab, as well as the Preventive Controls tab. And then I've highlighted here also the organics resources and the food labeling link as well. And then the last thing I've wanted to point out is the Contact Us link on the website. If you do have questions, certainly if you have questions about the import requirements or anything we've talked about in this presentation, you can send those to me. I'm happy to answer those questions for you, and to our technical cooperation unit, we'll definitely get those answers. But there are certain types of questions where there are other groups within the CFIA who may be able to help. I just wanted to point out two categories. So the first is if you have questions related to a license application, applying for a Safe Food for Canadians license, those would need to be directed to our My CFIA account in the permissions office, which is linked here on the left-hand side. And the other thing is I wanted to mention our National Import Service Center. So if there are questions related to a particular shipment, or you've made a declaration for a shipment and you have questions about that declaration, those should be directed to our National Import Service Center. The National Import Service Center at CFIA is open 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And they're responsible for reviewing the import declarations and providing a release recommendation back to CBSA. So if you have an issue related to a specific shipment, we'd recommend that you refer to the National Import Service Center for those. Okay, so with that, I'll thank you again for the invite today, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Mil gracias, Matt, por tu presentación. Ahora tenemos
Thank you very much,
tiempo
Matt, for your
para
presentation. Now we have the time for
y
Q&A.
con
And
respecto a la presentación,
regarding
vamos a
the
compartir,
presentation, yes,
la
we will share the
presentación
presentation
con los
with the
participantes
participants
después
in the
del
webinar
webinar, y entonces
once
pueden
we
contar
conclude.
con
So
esto sin
you'll receive
problema.
an email, no
Y,
problem. We'll include
de
the
nuevo,
presentation.
si
And once
tienen
again,
alguna pregunta,
if you
la
have
pueden
any
poner
questions, you
en el
can
chat
type
o
them
también
in the
en
chat, or
el
you can also type
pequeño,
them in the
la
Q&A
cajita
box
abajo de su
at the
pantalla
bottom of your
con
screen.
Q&A. Creo que es otra manera también.
This is another way in which you can send us your
Entonces,
questions.
si vamos
Okay.
con el chat y vamos a poner
So
unos
if we go to the chat,
enlaces también para
and on the
página,
chat, we're
hay
going to
mucha
type in the links.
información en el
There
sitio web de
is
la
a
CFIA.
vast amount of
Entonces, vamos a
information
poner el link
available to you in
para
the site.
página.
So we're
Creo
going
que
to
por
type in the
razones de
link
alimentos,
so that you
de
can
hecho,
check
la voy
the requirements
a
for
poner
food
ahora.
imports into
Y
Canada.
también tenemos el
And
herramienta que, o
we
la
also
herramienta
have the
que
tool
Matt habló,
that Matt spoke about, which is
Automated
the
Import Tracking System.
AIRS.
Vamos a poner el
And
link
we are going to type in the link
herramienta
for
también
this
en
tool
el
in the chat box as
Entonces,
well.
si
Very
checamos
well.
en el chat,
So
tenemos
we have a few questions in the chat box, in the
solamente voy
Q&A
a ir
box.
un poco arriba para ver preguntas. Y veo que hay representación de muchos estados de
Yes,
México.
I see we have the participation of many states from Mexico. It's wonderful to have you join. It's great to see all your names in the screen. Thank you very much for participating. And I see the participation of many different sectors as well. This is great.
Vamos a ir, ok. Y aquí, Matt.
Okay, we have a question, Matt. How can I go over the maximum residue levels allowed for organic and conventional pesticides in food?
Sorry, I think I'm not getting the interpretation on my side. Sorry.
So I can read it in English if you want, Matt. You can hear me well? Okay.
Yes,
So the
thanks.
first question is, how can we find out the maximum, the MRLs for organic products and also regular products? And maybe we can put a link to Health Canada's website as well. But if you want to just say a few words maybe on that.
Yeah. So those limits are found on Health Canada's website. We can put the link here and we can share the information. Actually, if we're going to share the presentation, then the links will be there as well, but we're happy to share that information with you after the presentation as well, for sure.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question, is there a database of certified or recognized Mexican exporters from CFIA, so a CFIA database?
Right. So for meat and live or raw shellfish, there is a list of approved establishments on CFIA's website. And again, we can share that after the meeting, no problem. However, for other foods, certification or approval from CFIA of those exporters is not required. So it's only for meat and live or raw shellfish that you would have a list. And again, we're happy to share that.
Excellent. Next question is regarding food from insect origin. Maybe I'll switch to the Spanish channel just to make sure that the translation is adequate. I'll be back. Entonces, la pregunta es, ¿existe alguna consideración?
The question is, are there any considerations in the certificate for food products regarding insects additionally to the fertilizers excreted by the insect itself?
Are you getting the question?
Yeah, I'm not getting it. Sorry.
Okay. I guess the question is, are you on the English channel, Matt?
This is the English channel. Can you hear me? Check.
How do is there something I need to do on my end?
So
I don't think I am.
This is the English channel. Check.
So Matt, at the bottom of your screen, you go on the 3 dots more, and you'll be able to select interpretation.
Check. 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Okay. There I have. Yep, I've got it now. Thank you.
Okay, so the question was, is there any consideration on certificates for food products regarding insects additionally to the fertilizers excreted by the insect itself?
So there's food made from insects would not require a certificate. The chemical limits set by Health Canada would apply to those foods as they would any other. And so you would just need to check on Health Canada's website depending on which pesticide you're dealing with, that you're concerned with, check what the limits are for Canada for those. And then it would be the importer's responsibility to make sure that they have that information in their preventive control plan documented in case they're inspected by CFIA and need to demonstrate that. That's where that information would be kept.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. There's another question here. I understand that the organic certificate needs to be uploaded to the import database when making an import declaration for an organic food. The Canada-Mexico Organic Equivalency Arrangement also requires an organic export certificate for the shipment. Does that export certificate needs to be uploaded to the import system? If not, who is this document provided to?
Right. So I think I'd be more comfortable taking that question to our organics team here at CFIA. My understanding is that the organic certificate, would need to be uploaded with the first importation of that food. And then it has a period of validity of 1 year, during which it doesn't need to be uploaded again. You would just provide a reference number for future imports. But if there is more detail needed around that, I think I'd feel more comfortable consulting with our organics team on that.
Thank you, Matt, and we are definitely taking notes of those questions, so we'll get back. Now I'll go in the chat. There's a question about foreign companies. Can you explain a little bit more about foreign companies acting as importers regarding FFC licensing and other requirements?
Right. So as I mentioned, if you're a foreign company, we'll speak specifically about Mexico here because it will differ depending on the country. If you're sending meat or shellfish to Canada, you are permitted to hold a Safe Food for Canadians license as an importer in Mexico. And of course, the controls around meat and shellfish still apply, where they have to come from approved establishments, etc. However, for other foods like fresh fruits and vegetables, a foreign supplier a supplier in Mexico would have to work with a Canadian importer, a business physically located in Canada, to be the SFC, the Safe Food for Canadians license holder for those foods.
Excellent. And now I'm looking in the chat again. The questions are coming in, and yes, there's a question also, and Matt mentioned that, but if you have any follow-up, that's always a lot of information to digest when we do those presentations. If there's any follow-up, we would be happy to take any question after. So no problem with that. Through the embassy or directly, we can put our email also in the chat. There's a question about MRLs for MRLs for organic products regarding if they are the same as the US. We will share again like the link to Health Canada, but
yeah, unfortunately, I can't confirm whether it's aligned with the US exactly, and it will probably depend on the chemical that you're looking at. So if there's certain specific MRLs you're concerned with, we can certainly take that back and follow up.
There are questions also in the chat about the export of particular products. We will put the best recommendation is to check with the air system. We will put the link in the chat so you can go and you do a research. So the air system is a Canadian system. It includes all products from textiles to food to animals. So it's really the best place to look because you will have the particular requirements, whether it is commercial or sanitary or other. So we will put the link. There's a question here in the chat. My client has been exporting fish and crab meat to the US for 15 years. New certifications should be met for Canada, I assume. Can you comment, please?
Right. So I have to make the distinction between if we're talking about live or raw shellfish, it's a little bit different, but for all other fish and seafood, approval of the establishment from CFIA is not required. Those would be imported as fish or seafood by an importer in Canada, who would need the controls I mentioned earlier around preventive controls, documenting the hazards associated with the food and how they're being mitigated, that type of thing. But there's no approval process for foreign establishments of fish and seafood outside of the live and raw shellfish.
Thank you, Matt. Hay una preguntita en el chat aquí. ¿En qué sitio puedo encontrar información sobre?
There's a question that says, where can I find information for organic foods and imports and exports to Canada? We're going to list the link in the chat, and we are going to also include more information so that you can search for more details on it.
Okay, there's a question here in the chat regarding bringing samples to Food Expo like CIAL, for example. Is there a permit or license we need to have?
Sorry, a permit or license for which?
For example, for a food product, like to bring samples to CFIA or other types of big food show.
So there is an exemption in the regulations for samples of food that are imported either for a trade show or research purposes. We can provide you with the link to that information on our website as well. You're testing my memory now. I think it might be 200 kilograms, but I want to verify that, and we'll send you the information for sure. But there is an allowance for a certain amount of food for those types of studies or end uses.
Thank you. Another question here in the chat. So there's a question about alcoholic beverages, and are they considered within this sphere? We've had changes on that, so I'll let you elaborate a little bit more.
Sure. So alcoholic beverages are not subject to the Safe Food for Canadians regulations in terms of licensing. They are regulated separately under the Intoxicating Liquors Act, and so they have been, for the most part, scoped out of the Safe Food for Canadians regulations. I think there are some limited traceability requirements that apply to alcoholic beverages in terms of tracking the movement of those foods. But otherwise, the other requirements around licensing and preventive controls don't apply to alcoholic beverages.
Another question here: in the import declaration made in the air system, is the import declaration made in the air system, or does the import database have a different name?
Right. So the air system is simply a guidance tool. It's a database. The import declaration is made in a different system, which we'll sometimes refer to as the integrated import declaration, or sometimes referred to as the single window initiative or single window system. But it's a separate system. The AIRS tool is simply a database of requirements.
Excellent. Y hemos podido una gran cantidad de
We have received, we have typed in a lot of links in the chat box for you regarding the Health Canada and others. So you can consult it. Take a look at those links, please, whenever you have the time. And once again, these links are in Matt's presentation that you'll receive later on. Whenever you check the presentation, you get the possibility to access those links as well. If a Mexican exporter of fruits and vegetables wants to export to Costco or Walmart in Canada, these two or large retail, do they require a special permit for importing?
So in general, if you're sending fresh fruits or vegetables to Canada, there's no special permit that would be required. The main requirement will be that it's being imported by a Safe Food for Canadians license holder. So a license would be required for import. However, it would not be the foreign supplier who's holding that license. So if it's being sent to Costco, for example, then most likely Costco will be the import license holder for that shipment, for those shipments.
Thank you. There's a question here about how does the import process work for shipments to Canada through online sales site like Amazon? Are you able to say a few words about that?
So in general, the selling of food through an e-commerce site like Amazon is considered a commercial transaction. And so those imports need to be imported by a Safe Food for Canadians license holder. Again, there's flexibility in who that license holder might be. So it may not be Amazon who's holding the license. There may be a third party who's the import license holder who's responsible for the foods that are being traded through that e-commerce site. So it is a complex area that CFIA has been working on. But in general, when food is sold via e-commerce sites, CFIA considers it a commercial transaction that would require a Safe Food for Canadians license.
You. I think that's the bulk of the question that we got. There's a lot of questions that are similar, so I think you answered well. If there's anything from the audience, any additional question, now's the time to do it. I will take an opportunity also to mention that we have a link in the chat for the survey. It will only take a couple of minutes of your time, but please just tell us how we did and how we can improve for next webinar. There's a question here, Akikoreo, which email we can send our questions for more precisions on some of the elements that were discussed today. So maybe we can put the Technical Cooperation Unit address in the chat. Just feel free. We also have a representative at the Embassy of Mexico, of the Embassy of Canada in Mexico, sorry. Natalia, if you want to put your email in the chat as well, I think it's very good to meet everyone. So I think that is all. I see we have a little bit more questions. So let's finish with those questions here in the Q&As, and maybe we can conclude. There's questions about alcohol. This will be on the website. Okay, there's a question on the labelings of organic products under the equivalency between Mexico and Canada and the US-Mexico equivalency if the labels are different. What I recommend is that you have a look maybe at the website just to see, because we do have some Q&As also on the organic page for CFIA. And those are two different programs, but I would maybe invite people to have a closer look.
Mary Pierre, the labeling tool, the link was included in the chat, just so you know.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. And the organic page as well. Creo que está todo con respecto a las preguntas.
I believe this is everything regarding the questions, and so as we have said before, we are going to share the presentation once the webinar concludes. That way you will have all the information available in a single place. And before we conclude, I would like to say a few words. But first, I would like to give the floor to the Embassy of Mexico and Canada, and we have the presence of the ambassador, Maria, and she's the political affairs, and so the floor is yours.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenos días, tardes.
Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon.
Muchas gracias por esta presentación.
Thank you very much for this presentation.
Yo soy Cristina Oropesa, como
My name is Cristina Opresa, like Marie Pierre was saying.
Embajada de México en Ottawa.
I am in the Mexican embassy here in Ottawa.
Quería,
And I wanted to, first of all, thank the colleagues. Matt, thank you very much for your presentation. It was a great presentation. Additionally, as you can see from the embassy, we've detected there's a lot of interest, especially now when we see, with the way we see things in North America, there's more and more interest of Mexican companies to join the Canadian market, and also of Canadians to go to Mexico. So from the embassy, we are trying to foster these type of meetings or get-togethers in order to have our producers and our companies in Mexico to have the information, the correct information. I believe that the key to this webinar is to provide us with the necessary information so that you can make the best decisions possible. And this is what we are committed to here in the embassy. As you saw, perhaps in Mexico, there's a lot of trust in how to work with the US market, and now we need to have a lot more information in order to have the same level of confidence grow regarding the requirements in Canada. I know that Canada is a country that pays a lot of importance in phytosanitary aspects and food safety. They are very careful with this, and so we thought it was important to start with this webinar so that we could have this information handy. I believe it's very important for those who connected to please bear in mind the aspect of working with importers, that they need to have these permits, as was explained before. Also to look into labeling in Canada, because this is very important, and all the different processes. Maybe they may seem complicated, maybe we've sent 20 or 30 links, but I can assure you that working with the Canadian authorities, and as you saw today, it's always very cordial. It's very user-friendly. The information is available. And in the embassy, we have the commitment of facilitating more information to you and facilitating contacts with access to colleagues like Marie-Pierre and Matt, because the information is there. It's important to have the right information, and those who have it will be able to do the processes correctly, and they'll be the ones who have success in entering or accessing this market. And this is, at the end of the day, what we want. As I was saying, Canada has 40% of its market with importing products, and I believe that Mexico can play a key role in it as we reinforce our political relationship, our mobility relationship with them. And there's a great possibility for us to reinforce our direct commerce with them. And we are committed to holding more webinars like this, because there are many questions, maybe a little bit more follow-up with the organic products, but we on our side are also going to do something special regarding alcoholic beverages. This is a recurring question that we get, and let you know that there's many provincial regulations that control this market for alcoholic beverages, and we're going to do something regarding that. But thank you all very much. I hope this is the beginning of a series of events and webinars that will allow us to approach one another between Mexico and Canada. Thank you.
Gracias, ministra, por estas lindas palabras. Estoy
Thank
totalmente
you for
de
your wonderful
acuerdo
words. I
con
fully
respecto a la
agree with
importancia,
the importance
hoy
on
más que nunca,
now
de
more
la
than
buena
ever
relación
on
entre Canadá y
the
México.
relationship
Somos
between Canada and
socios
Mexico.
muy
We
buenos
are
socios y
really
tenemos
good
que
partners,
continuar
and we have to
seguir con esta
continue
buena relación.
with
Y
our
es
great
siempre un
relationship. And it
placer
is always a
colaborar con
pleasure to
México en este
collaborate with
webinario con
Mexico
la
in
embajada.
webinars like this
Entonces,
and with the embassy.
totalmente
So
abiertos
we are
para
totally
explorar otros temas.
open to exploring
Tomen
other
nota del
topics.
tema de
Please
los
take note.
orgánicos, también
We've
algunas
taken note of the organic
actualidades. Es un
foods
tema
and
un
also
poco
of
particular
the
porque,
alcoholic
como
beverages. This is a peculiar
lo
topic
dijo,
because,
hay también las
like it was
provincias
said,
estas
the
regulaciones
provinces
también.
have
Entonces,
specific
es un
regulations, and
poco
so this is
complejo
something
a
that is a
veces,
bit complex
pero
at
con
times.
gusto podemos
But we'll very
hablar más
gladly
y,
speak more about this
y determinar los,
and
cuáles
determine
webinarios
which
vamos a
webinars are
hacer
needed
próximamente.
for the future.
Antes de concluir,
Before we
de
conclude,
verdad, me
in
gustaría
reality
darles
conclude,
gracias a
I
la
would like to
presencia
first
de
thank
todos y todas
all of you
hoy.
for
Fue
joining
un gran
today.
placer.
It was
Gracias
truly
a
a
Matt por
pleasure.
su
Thank you to
presentación.
Matt
Siempre es un
for his
placer
presentation. It's
colaborar
always
contigo
a
también. La
pleasure to
información
collaborate with
era
you.
muy
The
completa.
information
Hay
is
mucha
very
información,
thorough.
pero
There's a
está
lot of
comunicada de
information
manera
there, but
muy
it's
bien
communicated in a
clara.
very
También gracias
understandable
a la
way. Also,
señora
thank you
Carla
to
Noriega para la
the
interpretación hoy.
interpretation
Yo sé
services.
que
Thank
también
you
con
for
usted en
this.
español
I know that with my
siempre es un
Spanish,
placer
it's
poder hablar
a bit
español,
complicated.
pero
It's always
a
a
veces
pleasure to speak
es
Spanish, but
más
sometimes
duro para los
work
que
is
no lo
harder
hablan, porque
with
mi español no está
interpretation because
perfecto.
my
Entonces,
Spanish is not
gracias por su
perfect yet.
paciencia
So thank you for
también
your
y por el
patience.
buen
And
trabajo
also
para
thank you
la
for the excellent
interpretación
work
entre
with
todos los participantes.
thank you also
Vamos
for the
a
participation
continuar
of
por
all
los
those who
asuntos
joined. So
y
we're gonna
estoy contemplando
stay in touch. I'm
el próximo webinario
very
con mucho
happy
placer.
to
Entonces, les
plan
deseo
for
a
the next
todos y
webinar.
todas
So I wish you
un
all
buen día,
a
una
great
linda
day.
tarde.
I hope you have a nice afternoon.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias, chao. Gracias.